Welcome back, family. Welcome back. Now, this is video 3. Still talking about the bloodline. Still talking about the bloodline from Abraham to Christ. I'm going to show you in these parts on how the bloodline from Abraham leads to Christ being the king ultimately. It's mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing, but I need you all to go back. You got to see the storyline. You got to see the people connect. So I need you to go back, if you have not already, watch part 1, watch part 2, and then watch this right here, part 3. Or you can watch this and then go back and then put all the pieces together yourself. Got my little notes here, notes over here, but let's go. So I will not be reading you scripture. I will be just giving you cliff notes and reading you and telling you the story, but giving you places you can go to read the story yourself, because I do encourage you to read it yourself, because when you read it yourself, you find things out yourself. Because I don't want to tell you everything, but I'm going to give you details. But I want you to see things for your own experience of this journey. Okay? So, we're going to talk about the covenant son being Isaac. All right? Now, there's a discrepancy on who the covenant son. We'll talk about that a little bit later before I end this video. But the covenant son being Isaac. Now, let me give you a backstory about Isaac. Isaac is the only child between Abraham and Sarah, his wife, his given wife. Not his concubine, not his second wife, but his given wife, which was Sarah, right? Now, understand that he had this child at 100 years old. She had this child at 90 years old. Now, we have to understand it's a little different based off the air, based off what they were eating. He may have been 100 years old, but it was a different type of 100 years old, even though he was still old and decrepit. give that no doubt. But at the same time, God gave him something back, and I'm going to explain it to you now. But let me get back to Isaac, the covenant son. So Isaac, there's not a lot mentioned, but he does play some key roles in some things. And I'm going to explain those things because he kind of is born, has one experience, then you don't hear about him for a very long time until he has children. But let's go back to Isaac. So Isaac being the covenant son, born of, like I said, born of his father, which is Abraham, born of his mother, which is Sarah. Abraham being 90, Abraham being 100, she being 90. Now, a question you might ask. How do we know that he was born, Isaac, a special child or a miracle child? Well, as you read the story, you see the miracle of him being born and his parents being of the age. But it actually explains it in the book of Romans. Now, you have to go to Romans chapter 4, verse 18, I believe it is. Yes, 18 to 21. And it explains to you how Abraham being dead in the body. Now, he wasn't dead as being a corpse. He was dead in the body, meaning he had no virility. If you don't know what virility means, give you a homework assignment, go check it out. Go see what virility means. I'll give you a hint. He didn't have any strength. Any strength to produce a child. But I need you to go look it up because I want you to know what virility means for those who don't know. A lot of you are educated, and I know, and you already know, so I'm not going, I'm not testing your education. I just want you to know that he had no virility, okay? So that's one part of it. The second part of the miracle was the fact that his mother, Sarah, Isaac's mother, Abraham's wife, she was barren. She was barren. In this case, barren means she could not reproduce. She could not hold a baby. Like I said in, I believe it was 2 or part 2, that she was one of the women in the world who could not have children at all. At all. For Abraham to get his virility back, on top of her to have a baby, that's a miracle. Take that and think about that. Study the fact that he had no virility. She was barren, but yet they still had a child. Even at their old age, God gave him his virility back so that he can have his child. Now, Second thing, after the birth of Isaac, now there were some discrepancies between the parents, and I'm gonna say the parents because you had Abraham, Isaac, and then you had, I don't want to call him his stepmother, but his father's concubine, his mother's servant, which is Hagar. She and her son, which is Ishmael, his brother, the first son from Isaac, which was not a covenant of God, but done by man, which they, if you go back to part 2, I explained that he had them leave. So there's a discrepancy. So Isaac, being the miracle child, hope you can read this when I write it. Miracle. What can I spell today? Miracle. Isaac was a miracle based off the explanation that I just gave, right? So Isaac being the miracle. Now, after the discrepancy with the parents and sending off Hagar and Ishmael, you don't hear about Isaac until this time. Now, how can I put this? The next time you hear about Isaac, it's about making a sacrifice. Now, this goes into the fact of a very common phrase that we use in the world today. It goes into the fact of finding a ram in the bush, or ram in the bush theory. The ram in the bush concept comes from this very incident. So what happened was, God tested Abraham's faith in him. So he asked Abraham to sacrifice his only son. When he said only son, he meant the only son in his household at that current time, because he had sent his first son away with his mother based on the discrepancy. Make sure you go read that and find out why. So after that, I don't really need anything else. I know the story. So Isaac, the miracle son, he's the only son there. And we'll talk about Ishmael in part 4. Isaac, miracle son, now he's asked to be a sacrifice. Now, there's a discrepancy, but when you read, I'm not going to give you that because I want you to continue to read that aspect of that part of Genesis. Now, some people think that Isaac was a baby. I'm going to do this. I want you to comment below as you read this story, knowing when his mother had him, his father had him, and when he was asked to be a sacrifice, the timeline, and give me his age. There is an age that he was, and it was not a baby. A lot of people think that he was a baby when he was asked to be sacrificed. No, he was of the age that he could have said, "Nah, Pop, you're not gonna lay me on this altar and sacrifice me." But he did. He surrendered his life, and he presented himself as a sacrifice upon his father, tying him up and tying his legs up and tying his arms up, as they did sacrifice when they sacrificed lamb. But let me rewind the story a little bit. Now, put yourself in a parent's position, or put yourself in any position when you have to sacrifice something that you love. I mean, something that you love, that you've been waiting on your entire life, right? Your entire life you've been waiting on these things to happen, and then you're asked by God Almighty to make a sacrifice. So put yourself in the mind of Abraham and what he was thinking at that current time. Not just the fact that he had to sacrifice something that he totally loved, but he had to sacrifice a human being, which was his own seed, his child, which was the only child that he had in his household to run his household after he would pass, right? That's a big thing to kind of swallow. And the reason why it was common, and he probably, even though he questioned God, just think about yourself. Like, a lot of people be like, Abraham just did it. Like, okay, God, you said sacrifice my son. No, come on. He was a human being. He had some restraints. Come on, people. He had some restraints. Like, come on, God. I know he was. He's like, come on, God, are you serious? What are you talking about? He had to come to himself and say, you know what? Okay, God, I'm going to do it. He had to contemplate on it. I don't care what nobody say in the world. He had to contemplate on, you telling me all this time, I've been waiting for this covenant child that you told me you was going to give me, and now you want me to sacrifice him? You want me to sacrifice him? Come on. Come on. Put your mind in the mindset of a parent or a mindset of someone who loves somebody that you've been waiting on, or waiting on something so beautiful. Something that's going to set up the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, and you have to sacrifice it. You're going to have some restraints. You're going to question God. Don't act like you're not. I know he did, because he wouldn't be human if he didn't. But let me rewind the story. So, after he questioned God, and he kind of, surrendered. He didn't kind of surrender, he did surrender. He surrendered, and he complied. He complied. And the reason that he complied, I believe, not only because he trusted God, but because there were other belief systems. If you study the time of this happening in the different belief systems, they were sacrificing children. Did a little study about this years ago, and even saw some things and read some things that they were sacrificing children. Children were being sacrificed. As crazy as it may sound, in different countries and different belief systems, they were doing this. So it was not common for this to be known or be done. And Abraham probably in the mindset saying, I serve a different type of God. But then he asked me to do something that other belief systems were doing. It just pulled on him. But he did it. And even with him doing it, he took himself, some things with him, and he only took one person with him other than his son. And when they got to the place, they went high up on the mountain. Now you got to understand this. They went high up on the mountain, and only him and his son went. And as they went, his son, being of age, asked where's the lamb that they would be sacrificing. Well, Abraham said in good faith, God will provide. We're just going to focus on two words. God will. God will. He will provide. He will do it. He will provide. He will do it for you. God will provide. So they went up on the mountain. You got to understand. They went high up on the mountain. Now, if you study mountains and things like that, as you go higher and higher, things start to get deserted, where you don't see too much. And I know he didn't recognize it. So, as he gets up there, like I said, his son was of the age of that he could have rebelled, and he could have restrained against his father. Plus, his father was older, because you got to think. Now, he had him at 100. Now, I'm not going to tell you the years, because I want you to put it down in the comments. He was of age to kind of pull back from his father, run from his father, and his old man happened to chase him if he actually wanted to take it that far, but he didn't. His son also, being chosen to be a sacrifice, submitted himself. Not only did Abraham obey, but his son obeyed. His son surrendered himself. Surrendered himself to be tied up. Surrendered himself to be tied up by his legs. Surrendered himself to lay upon the altar to be sacrificed. It's deep, people. It's deep. And as the story goes on, Abraham pulls out his knife, because what they did when they sacrificed lambs is after they tied them up so they couldn't move, they can pull their neck back and they can slice their neck. So as he pulled his knife out, he honored God, and I know he was in tears, There's no doubt about it. I don't care what you say. People say, well, don't say he was in tears. It's a, believe me, if you were sacrificing something you love so much, there's no way in the world you're not in tears. I mean, in boo-hoo tears, not understanding what's going on or why you have to do this. But you're doing it because you're obeying. And it's the ultimate sacrifice of faith. So as he raises his hands to God, and he's probably saying his last goodbyes, but yet praying God, saying, this is what you want. This is your ultimate sacrifice. This is your sacrifice. This is what you asked me to do. Soon as he goes to strike the child, bah! There's an angel. And said, and what was said was, do not touch the lad. Do not touch the lad. For God knows that you trust him. It's deep, people. It's deep. It said, do not touch the lad, for God knows that you trust him. He knows that you love him. He knows that through anything, because of anything, you will sacrifice something you've been waiting for your entire life because God asked you to do it. That's a deep commitment, people. This ram in the bush theory, this ram in the bush quote comes from that incident that happened. Just let that simmer in and understand that this man was about to sacrifice his only son in his house. Yeah, he had another son, but he didn't talk to him as much. He wasn't in the same city or country or whatever you want to call it. He wasn't there. He was about to get rid of his son, the one son that God said he will be the one. He's about to sacrifice him. On top of the fact that he was just his child. No matter if he was the one or not. This was his child. But again, God will. He will provide. He will see you through. He will make it happen. Sometimes we make sacrifices and we don't understand why. Or we get to the point of where we're getting ready to do something. But God will. He will. He will do what? He will provide. He will make do for you. He'll see you through. So think about that for a second. Let that simmer in. Even after you watch this video, let that simmer in. Just let that just soak in you. But God will. It's about trust, it's about faith. And it's hard. Think about how hard it is. I go back to it because as I think about it, I almost want to go into tears because that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to do. And some things that we have to give up and make a sacrifice with, that's not as hard as knowing that this child is the one. You were told by this. It's hard. Just think about that. But we're gonna keep going. I'm not gonna shed any tears. I want to. I can feel it, but I'm not. So, at that very moment, the angel says, Abraham, don't touch the child. Don't touch the lad. And then he points him in the direction and said, there's your sacrifice. And there was a ram that was caught in the thickets of a bush. There's your sacrifice. So then him and his father get the lamb and they make the sacrifice unto God in unison together. And I know at that moment, Abraham was in relief. But he trusted God all the way to the point of taking his son's life. I guess that's what this video is all about, and I didn't even really, I know I had to tell the story, but we gotta trust him all the way up to that point, and trust God that he gonna make a way. God will make a way. He will provide. He will provide. Whew, that was deep, family. I hope you felt that, because it's deep. And I almost want to just cut the video, but I'm going to keep going, because there's more to the story. So, after knowing all of that, this is where the discrepancy comes when it comes to the covenant son. So, the Islamic belief is that the covenant son was not Isaac, but it was Ishmael, his first son. But understanding the fact that he was already sent off, he wasn't in the household, there's no way that it could be Ishmael. There's no way, because even when you study the form of it, Ishmael was, and I don't want to say this in a bad way, but he was a mixed breed. He wasn't a pure blood. He was mixed with Egyptian blood because his mother was an Egyptian. He was not circumcised at the point of at his birth when the covenant actually took place. Because once Isaac himself was born, that's when the art of circumcision was born. Circumcision was born and birthed among the people. And from then on, every male being born was circumcised, which was a sign of the belief system and a sign of the tribe. But that miracle, because that was two miracles. Because you had the miracle of him being born and the miracle of the ram in the bush theory. And what happened, that was a miracle, because at that point of no return, God showed up a miracle to provide a sacrificial lamb for the sacrifice. See, people. So, that is a brief and story time of the covenant son. We're going to tell a little bit more about Isaac and Ishmael in video 4, so stay tuned. I do appreciate you watching, and always, I salute the divinity in you, and I will see you next time on the Bloodline. Peace.